Welcome in to Check the Mic. Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson. We're live on YouTube. Our somewhat new, Thursday, 9 a.m. start time. Today, talking the best player at every position in the NFL. Sam, you have a list. I have a list. We're going to go position by position around the NFL and give our best players. Have a little fun here in June.
Yeah, should be good. I think a lot of them are going to cross over. I think there's some positions where it's fairly conclusive that there is one guy that's just definitely the best. There are others, though, where it's more of a debate.
As always, it's more about the discussion than the actual list, right? We'll send it out to social media. People will be upset. I don't know if you're glitching on YouTube or not, or if it's just StreamYard, but we apologize in advance.
Doesn't look like it's happening in YouTube or on YouTube. It's just StreamYard is going to be constantly dropping out and making it quite annoying.
I just see you popping in and out, and I see YouTube looking good. So yeah, apologize if anything comes through. But yeah, it's about the discussion, as always, right? So let's get into it. You ready?
Yep, let's go.
Perfect June content. So we'll start with quarterback. And do you have a specific criteria for how you went and made your list here? So you went away, made a list. I made a list, and we're gonna bring it together here.
I mean, the criteria is who's the best player. Like right now, it's that kind of ridiculous, amorphous idea of if you had to win a game tomorrow, and you had to pick one of these guys with no, context of who they're playing with, what they're done, like just, based off all the evidence we have right now, who do you think the best player is on the planet right now?
All right, well, let's do it. Who is the best quarterback in the NFL right now, Sam?
I believe the best quarterback right now is Josh Allen. I think he's become the guy. Like for years, it was Patrick Mahomes. Obviously, Brady, that generation, once they went, Mahomes took over. The start of Mahomes' career was absolutely mind-blowing. The last couple of years, though, he's not been that guy, and really it's been Josh Allen. I think you can make a case for a couple of other people, but Allen's combination of freak show wow plays, like everything he can do with his arm, the cheat code that is his short yardage ability, like his athleticism, the fact that he basically does not take sacks. I mean, one of the lowest sack rates, pressure to sack rates you're going to find anywhere, like utterly absurd analytics numbers behind him as well. I think Allen's the guy right now.
Man, I was considering that because when we're doing this as a process, look, I think if you were just saying over the last 2 years, who are the best quarterbacks, therefore heading into 25, who should be the best quarterbacks? Yeah, I don't think Mahomes is number one. I think it's a pretty clear contest between Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. So I think it's close between both of those guys. I still took a step back and went with this full body of work aspect of things where I put Mahomes at number one still as the best quarterback. And the best quarterback in the NFL discussion, right? There's nuance to this, Sam, right? There's nuance, right? People still have Tom Brady debates. Was he the GOAT? Was he this? And then when we have these best player debates, it doesn't mean at every point of their career they were the best. Right. There were points in Brady's career where there was 2 and 3 year stretches where you say, oh, I'd rather take Peyton Manning. I'd rather take Aaron Rodgers over this 2-year stretch. But we're talking about the full body of work. So again, that's not what we're ranking right now. We're saying who's the best quarterback right now. But I'll still say the body of work for Mahomes, outlasts Allen and Lamar. But it's really close for me. I mean, I think we're at a point, I didn't know that we would get here a couple of years ago. I think we're at a point where the top 4 quarterbacks in the NFL, they're clear for me, where it's Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, and Joe Burrow. I know Joe Burrow is probably the hottest button issue out of that group where, there's varied opinions on him, and they're both analytical. He takes too many sacks, and it's scouting. Oh, his arm's not great. Versus Justin Herbert, who can do more, right? So those debates are out there. But I would say Mahomes, Allen, Lamar, the clear top 3. Honestly, if you picked any of those 3 right now, I'd be fine with it. And I'll say Mahomes has been if you go throw for throw over the last 2 years, he's been a fringe top 10 quarterback over the last 2 years. That's just where he's been, 8 to 10 quarterback over the last couple of years. But he still has the late game magic, the ability to win, adjusted his style over these last couple of years. So the stats aren't there. It's not as flashy, but the Chiefs are still getting the job done, and he's the biggest driver of that still, even when the stats aren't as good. So that's where I'm going with Mahomes right now. But when you're talking about this stuff, right, it's Allen and Lamar have played better over the last 2 or 3 years, or the last 2 years especially, than Mahomes.
Yeah, I mean, it's never a mathematical, certainty when you're talking about these things. Even if you think quarterback A is better than quarterback B could outplay quarterback A in any given football game. I mean, that's always been the case, right? Brady didn't beat everybody that he played simply because he was the better quarterback. There were times where random ass people had a better game than Tom Brady and beat him. And if you needed one guy to win the game tomorrow, Mahomes could be that guy. Any of these guys could be that guy, right? I would say the chances are most of the time just of those quarterbacks, but it might be 55-45 versus some of the other guys.
The other thing I'll add for all three of these guys, we always, when you're breaking down quarterbacks, you talk a ton about supporting cast, and this guy elevates the cast, and the cast is elevating them, and you certainly can't sum it all up with stats. I think Allen, Lamar, and Mahomes have all showed that they can elevate all those around them, right? Again, nuance to this conversation. There was a point in Mahomes' career where he had 2 Hall of Famers, probably the most dynamic receiver of his era in Tyreek Hill, most dynamic tight end of his era in Travis Kelce, and put up ridiculous stats. Now, he did win the 1 Super Bowl and had that 1 MVP without Tyreek Hill, still had Kelce. As Kelce's dwindled a little bit, you could say, hey, the stats have dwindled a little bit for Mahomes. But overall, they find a way to win no matter what the style is. Allen, we sit here and debate, does he have an X receiver? Does he have this or that? I think it's almost to the point where even if the supporting cast takes a hit, there's trust that Josh Allen's going to elevate that Bills offense. And the same thing with Lamar Jackson. If you're a Lamar Jackson supporter, you could have this conversation where it's like, where's his Tyreek Hill? Where's his Travis Kelce? Where's his Stephon Diggs? When has he had that high-end player? And yeah, we'll talk about running back. There's a Derrick Henry in there now. He's had Mark Andrews. He's had Zay Flowers is pretty good. He's never had this legitimate number one, but I think Lamar, his running ability makes the offensive line better, makes the receivers better, makes the whole offense better. And, so I think all of those guys have that ability. And even in Burrow, if you throw Burrow in the conversation, I would say none of the top 3 guys have had the offensive line woes that Burrow has had, sack rate or not, that, the nerds are debating. No one has had that type of pressure, but also no one's had the 1-2 punch at receiver that Burrow's had with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. But I think all 4 of those guys have showed that they can overcome some element of the offense not, being complete across the board and still being able to put up production and carry the team.
How much are you living in the past with the Patrick Mahomes thing based off what we know he is capable of, where he was, I think for a little stretch, I think he was unquestionably the best quarterback in the NFL. He really, though, hasn't played at that level for the last couple of years. We've seen this before where, Tom Brady or Peyton Manning or these great quarterbacks kind of reach the end of their career. And you have people that will argue to the death, they will be the best quarterback until they stop playing, even though we can see that isn't happening right now with Peyton Manning when he's dragging himself and the Broncos to the last championship off the back of defense. And there's no discernible difference between Peyton Manning and Brock Osweiler that year. And yet people will still be like, he's as good as ever, right? He's as good until he hangs him up. It's weird with Mahomes because it doesn't usually happen to quarterbacks in their prime where they just go on a relatively weak run, right? But Mahomes he hasn't been I don't think you can really argue that Mahomes has been at the level of Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson over the last couple of years. And yet you would take him in a game tomorrow over either of them.
Yeah, I agree. He hasn't been at their level, but I'm trying to not make, so as much as you said, and you're citing a few people who said, as long as Tom Brady and Peyton Manning are alive, they're 1-2. If you're ranking quarterbacks, it's those two. No matter how many ducks Peyton Manning was throwing in 2015, they're the best quarterbacks until they retire. On the other hand, I think media goes the other way. As soon as you see a hint of decline, it's like, he's lost it. Mahomes has lost it. Brady's over there. Not you. You would never do such things, Sam. You would never do this.
Never.
As soon as you see a hint, here, where's the cliff? Find the cliff. Show me the cliff. Where is it? He's this. He's falling apart, right? So I'm trying to like slow play that. I'm smart enough not to do that with Mahomes. Now that if I had said Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson are better than Mahomes, that's not me doing that. But I think even in this decline for Mahomes, it's when the game is on the line, he's still been the best. And he has still been the guy that, hey, when you need a drive, he's going to go do it. I think he's dealt with, and look, this goes both ways. If part of his greatness were the stats, well, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Andy Reid were a big part of that. If we're going to say, well, he doesn't have that anymore, therefore the stats aren't there, then let's not give him full credit for the stats. But now that those guys aren't the same, doesn't have the same dynamic playmakers, yeah, the stats have taken a hit, but he's still maneuvering his game to be a little bit more ball control, take care of the ball, but still when the game's on the line, find a way to make the run, find a way to make the throw, and get the win. So that's why it's like in this decline, the Chiefs are still winning, and Mahomes is still a big driver of that. That's where I'm at. This isn't a full-on, hey, it's over. But look, I agree. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, you could argue, and Burrow last year especially. I mean, they've all played better than Mahomes. Like I said, Mahomes, if you're ranking quarterbacks throw for throw over the last 2 years, he's 8th, 9th. I mean, that's just where he is in quarterback play over the last couple of years by most metrics, whether it's PFF, whether it's EPA, whatever it may be, QBR. He's 5th to 8th, which is fine. I mean, the best quarterback in the league goes through stretches like that. That's the history. When Marino was the best quarterback in the league, he wasn't always the best every year. When Montana was the best quarterback in the league, he was battling Marino. When Brady was the best quarterback in the league, he wasn't always the number one quarterback every single year. So that's what I'm going with here.
All right.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
How am I coming through for you?
It's just fine. As far as I'm aware, it's just StreamYard constantly dropping out, making it quite difficult. But
it's just you glitching in and out. Drop us your best quarterback in the chat. Anyone else we should. Okay, so one of the other things I wanted to do for these is if there's who else could be the number one in the future. So let me just answer mine really quick before you go. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson for me. Like I'll give Mahomes one more year if Allen and Lamar outplay him. I'll do the leapfrog over Mahomes. So they would be the other guys in the future that I would put at number one on this list.
Yeah, you pitched me this idea of like, we'll talk about who the best player is at any given position, and then we'll give like the future, right? The guy that will be the best player, in a few years' time. And so I viewed that as like, well, let's try and find basically the youngest player that could become the best player in the league. Half of your list is guys that are like 30.
I did a combination of both.
You can't have Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson as like the future best. Like that's no.
Sure can't. For my list, because Mahomes is number one for me right now. If Allen and Lamar outplay him again, when we do this show a year from now, I will leapfrog them. I also agree with the one that you're going to add there. If there's a young player that's going to become number one, who is it, Sam?
Yeah. So on your list, you've got a 29-year-old quarterback as the best quarterback in the NFL. And if he's not in the next few years, it's going to be another 29-year-old quarterback that's the top guy.
My show. I can create the criteria. I can list any players I'd like. It's my show and your show.
I, on the other hand, have gone for a 24-year-old quarterback in Jaden Daniels going into his second year. I mean, we've said it this offseason already. Daniels looks like a future MVP. If he picks up the way he left off, and that's no guarantee based off what we've seen from various other quarterbacks, but Jaden Daniels showed last year he's got everything you want. He's got the arm. He's got the sort of defense reading ability. He's got the athleticism, and then he's got that it factor, right? The clutch gene, the ability to drag a team that shouldn't be there into the NFC Championship game, the ability to, oh, look, we're down late against Joe Burrow and the Bengals, just drop a perfect touchdown pass to win a game. Like he's got everything you want as long as he doesn't drop off hard in year two. And even if he does, maybe it's year 3, 4, he bounces back and becomes the best guy. Daniels looks like the most likely of those young quarterbacks to me now to be that future MVP and future best quarterback in the game.
No, I agree with that. Again, I put I used a little hybrid on my list of the young guy, but Jaden Daniels was in my mind as well. I'm glad you at least listed him there. Of the young quarterbacks who hasn't, done it for an extended period of time, I agree. Jaden Daniels has number one overall QB potential. It is funny how quickly things shift here. A year ago, we still probably would have said Caleb Williams, but we have it even just after watching a year of Caleb Williams. This isn't write him off, but there's enough concerns and holding the ball and everything. And look, a year from now, there's a history over the last 6 or 7 years of year two complete breakout quarterbacks. I mean, guys who look completely different in year two versus year one. I could absolutely see Caleb Williams having a monster year. I wouldn't be surprised if he had a monster year, right? With Ben Johnson, with some of the additions the Bears have made, and maybe we revisit this in a year. And we're also hopefully smart enough to cite again Bryce Young versus CJ Stroud, right? A year ago at this time, it was insane to even have put them in the same conversation after 1 year of watching them play football. But now they're a lot closer than they were a year ago. And so Caleb Williams he certainly has all that potential, all the skills to be there. But yeah, I agree. Jaden Daniels, what he showed as a rookie, the different ways that he can win and attack defenses, future number one overall potential at QB.
Yep.
All right, let's go running back here, Sam. Who's your best running back in the NFL right now?
I think Derrick Henry is still King Henry. Saquon Barkley had the amazing season last year, but it kind of meant that people almost overlooked what Derrick Henry did, which is an almost as ridiculous season. And the body of work that Derrick Henry has got behind him now is just absurd. Multiple different teams, multiple different offenses. The guy can, at his age, like, he's so powerful, he's so strong, he's so difficult to stop. And then if you do give him a head of steam and get him to the line of scrimmage, he's got home run ability. You don't think, a guy of his size, he's sort of not the classic home run hitter. You think of those guys as small, explosive, dynamic. But Henry, once you get him moving at that size, he's so hard to bring down, and he's fast. Like, if you get him up to speed, he's not run down. Like, he may be big and powerful, but once you get him lumbering, people do not, run him down, catch him from behind. He can go 99 yards.
Yeah, Henry's close for me. Saquon Barkley's close. I know we're going to have to discuss the difference between Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, and then my best running back. I'm going Christian McCaffrey. Still, coming off the injuries, we can't forget Christian McCaffrey. When he's out there, when he has the ball, as far as run pass threat, what he brings to the offense, you cannot forget how good Christian McCaffrey is. We can't have recency bias just because Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley had their special seasons. But I think those are the clear top three, right? I mean, those are the three top guys. And look, McCaffrey could be done. I mean, if he's absolutely cooked, then I look like an idiot here. But I'll give him one more year. Just like I'll give Mahomes one more year. We'll give McCaffrey one more year. But McCaffrey, as much as we've talked about Kyle Shanahan, and he's the running back maker, just put anybody in there, the Shanahan name, since the 90s, you just put any running back there. Of all the running backs that they've had over the last couple of years, McCaffrey, you could argue, is the one that's actually elevated that offense more, right? Every running back is productive and they do well. McCaffrey has taken that offense to another level. When they didn't have him last year, things seemed to fall apart. There's a lot of that, without breakdown here. It did coincide with Brock Purdy taking over as the starter. So there's, some confounding variables there, Sam. But I think McCaffrey, his knack for getting into the end zone, in the tight red zone, is outstanding. He's got the big play ability. He's got the short area ability. And like I said, of all the running backs, like, Saquon's close as far as a pass game weapon, but legitimate pass game weapon where I think McCaffrey, could be a slot receiver if he needed to be. So I just don't want to sleep on McCaffrey. I'm making a point on a couple of these. Like, let's not go straight recency bias. Mahomes and McCaffrey for me for the top two here.
Yeah, I mean, Saquon is the guy that we kind of have to cover as well, because coming off that season where he had an MVP kind of candidate type season, I think Saquon is the most physically gifted running back in the NFL. Like, I don't know how many other people could backwards hurdle over a guy, just in the course of running a play, but it's not many. He's got explosiveness. He's got, dynamism. His general physical skill set, I think, is probably the best of any running back in the NFL. And as we saw last season, if you put him behind the best offensive line in the NFL, that's a combination for, incredible production and insane kind of stats and just immediate touchdown success. Number one, most teams do not have the number one offensive line in the NFL. So in this mythical world of, hey, you needed one guy for a game tomorrow, I think you probably have to assume that you don't have the best offensive line in the league in that one game. But number two, I think, we forget what it looked like when you put him in a different situation. Like Saquon was with the Giants for years and did not look like that. Now, there were games where he looked like that. But overall, you have to at least recognize the impact that the Eagles' offensive line had on what Saquon was able to do. Now, he's a perfect combination for that. You put him in a situation like that, and he might turbocharge that more than a Christian McCaffrey or a Derrick Henry or any other running back. But I think in a more average situation, I think other running backs have slightly better vision. I think they have a slightly lower tendency to try and, bounce stuff and make the home run play. They'll just take 7 yards when there's 7 yards to be had. I think that's where Saquon is not as good as, certainly Derrick Henry is probably not as good as Christian McCaffrey, and maybe a couple of other running backs as well in that particular area.
I think that's a really good point by you, and that's probably where I landed. And look, it's not a knock to say this guy's the second or third best running back in the NFL. We're choosing one, right? We're ranking them. We're going out on a limb here. I would say if I have a good offensive line or a good to great offensive line, Saquon Barkley's the guy that I want. He's my number one, right there. This is an if-then statement here. The way you're looking at this, hey, we got to win a game tomorrow. We might have an average offensive line. I would rather Henry or McCaffrey. But the way you said he's the most talented or whatever, however you describe, most skilled or whatever, however you described him, I would say I would describe it differently as he's the skill set that I would want the most on my team if I have a good offensive line because of what we saw last year in Philadelphia. What was that stat I kept pulling out during the playoffs? He had like 20% of the 60-yard runs in the entire NFL last year. So when you have that good situation, Saquon's my number one guy. When I have a running quarterback in a good offensive line, Saquon's a guy that could take it to the house better than anybody when you give him a crease. And, we've said a bunch on the show here, this rejuvenation of the running back position. Like neither Derrick Henry nor Saquon Barkley was good in 2023, statistically. What changed in 2024? You go to the Ravens, you go to the Eagles, you go to a great situation with a running quarterback. You have room to run and you put up ridiculous numbers like Henry and Saquon did. So yeah, if I have that situation, he's the guy that I want. Henry's close. McCaffrey, as long as he comes back without any injury concerns, I still think he's as special as those other guys. And to this point had been more special than I think Henry and Saquon before those injuries hit last year.
I mean, Henry was still pretty good in 2023. Like it was just not as good as he was previously. He still had wasn't
it like three? It was like 3.9 yards per carry, but he still had more yards after contact than the same number than he normally has, right?
Well, it was 4.2 yards per contact and 12 touchdowns. But yeah, it was a massive step down from his previous. It was like, I think Derrick Henry, it was a classic example of like, that's where people start looking for the trend. Like the mistake people made with Derrick Henry in 2023 analysis was the same mistake I made when Tom Brady's decline started in 2014. And you're like, well, that's about the age quarterbacks start to decline. Let's write the eulogy, right? Like that's what people did with Derrick Henry. Oh, look, his numbers are down relative to previous years. And he's 29, 30 years old. Let's start writing him off now. It's probably all these carries have finally hit their weight. Like he's being dragged down. It's the beginning of the end, right? And you're like, yeah, but remember, he's running behind the worst offensive line in the NFL. The numbers will probably go down. And then you put him on a decent line, and suddenly 4.2 becomes 5.9 with Lamar Jackson. The impact that he has on that as well. Like, I just think it wasn't bad. It was just worse than it had been before.
All right, Sam, how about who could find themselves as number one on this list going forward here?
So I think your guy is an obvious name to throw out there. I thought about Jahmyr Gibbs as a name to put in here as well. I ended up going with Ashton Genty though, because I think, look, obviously we need to see what he's going to look like in the NFL, but as a prospect, like Genty was basically, he was up there with the true elite guys to come along in the last 20 years. And I think that's going to translate. I would be, again, pretty shocked if he didn't immediately become a good NFL player, and he could be special.
Yeah, I consider Genty, obviously, love him as a prospect. I went with Bijan Robinson. I mean, I think honestly the only thing missing from Bijan's game is the big playability. You know, how many times last year was
Which
I like,
should
man,
be there.
It should. It's not that he's slow, but I kept saying these are the best 5 to 15 yard runs in NFL history. And everybody's like, what about Barry Sanders? I'm like, yeah, Barry Sanders would take it more than 15. His special runs went to the house. Bijan Robinson's gliding, running that zone scheme, short area quicks, short area make you miss. He shows it in the pass game. Some of his receptions over his first 2 years, just catching and getting upfield quickly and making something out of nothing. I love watching Bijan Robinson run, but you watch his best runs, it's like, wow, that was amazing. It's like 12-yard gain. Whereas again, Saquon is completely different, right? You give him a crease and it's 60. So that's the only thing missing for me with Bijan Robinson. The number of times that he would go, average 5+ yards per carry with a long of 14 was amazing to me. But I love the way he runs. I love the way he catches the ball out of the backfield. I think Bijan, I think Genty, who you mentioned, Gibbs is another good shout, right? I think he's becoming a more complete back. He definitely has that. I mean, you absolutely have to account for his explosiveness, whether he's catching the ball out of the backfield or running it. But I went with Bijan on this list. But I think there's some good young backs in those few other guys that we mentioned.
Yeah.
All right, let's go receiver right now. I think this is tough. Always a lot of receivers to choose from here. Who did you go as your number one?
It is tough. I think it's harder than it's been previous years, where some years I think there's clearly like a best wide receiver in the NFL or a best, top two. I think the number is a bit broader this year. I would argue there's a clear 4, maybe 5 top wide receivers in the NFL. I ended up going with Jamar Chase as the best kind of composite of the group. And the more I watched them, the more I started going through some tape, the less I like that. I think I might go in a different direction right now, but Chase has he's got that size, speed. The thing, like his real superpower is he's got that effortless ability to shed contact and all the way through the route, whether it's a jam at the line of scrimmage. There was a play against Washington last year where Benjamin St-Juste, of all people, actually does a really good job jamming him at the line, and 10 yards into the route, he looks blanketed. Like it's like he's got hands all over him. He stopped the release, and down the sideline, it looks like a large corner like St-Juste. Like this is a winning rep. And then I still don't know how he did it, but Chase just gets rid of the contact. And by the time the ball arrives, he's got like 1.5 yards of separation, and it's a big play. I'm like, I don't know how he did that. I watched that play like 15 times and couldn't work out what he did to go from he's in trouble on this rep to actually he's just torched Benjamin St-Juste for a big play. But he does that all the time, and he's so good after the catch. He's like strong, powerful. Unlike Justin Jefferson, I think he does actually, ironically, I think he does a better job of kind of varying the pace of his routes. Like Jefferson does a really good job of head fakes and sort of sending a guy in the wrong direction. Chase does a really good job of like slowing down his pace and then exploding past the guy just when they think actually it's a chill rep. He's really, really good at that. But like they're two very different players, but they're both insanely dynamic.
Is that who you were debating between, Chase and Jefferson?
Those are the two obvious ones. I also think AJ Brown deserves a piece of the conversation. I think Nico Collins deserves a piece of the conversation. And he's the guy I think that most people would not put in there. The more I watch of Nico Collins tape, the more I think he's actually a lot more, he's a lot better at the things that people don't expect him to be good at than, like everyone thinks of Nico Collins. There's a play against the Colts, right, where they just heave it downfield and it's like in a double coverage and Nico Collins just goes up and beats 2 DBs for it. That's the type of play you think of when you think of Nico Collins. And he isn't as explosive off the line as certainly Jefferson and Chase and maybe a couple of other guys, but he's so much more nuanced than I thought he was as a route runner. He's incredibly quick to adjust, like when the scramble drill happens, which obviously happened quite a lot for the Texans last year. He's insanely quick to read that and start heading to the right place. His route running is way more nuanced than I gave him credit for. I think Nico Collins is actually a way better receiver than, like, the production is not a fluke. It's not just a product of, hey, you've got a really big, fast guy, start heaving the ball at him. Like, he's earning an awful lot of those targets with some really good heady play, like some really good smarts.
He's a good next player option, in that mix for who could be number one, Nico Collins. I'm going Justin Jefferson on this. I think it is close between him and Jamar Chase. Receivers always, if you're just going to look at production, it's always going to be dependent on quarterback and situation and everything. But I think what makes Jefferson special, and AJ Brown is in this conversation, is the fact that the production's always there, no matter who the quarterback is. If you said, hey, going into the season, he has Sam Darnold and Jamar Chase has Joe Burrow, who's going to produce more? Well, Jamar Chase did. He had Burrow, but we're talking about, was Darnold a one-year wonder because he had Jefferson there? And then you add, I think, the way Kevin O'Connell uses Justin Jefferson, moves him around, and just opens up everything else. I mean, all of these guys open up things for other players. I think Chase, one of the more impressive things about Chase is when he kind of converted from pure deep threat early on to then he's going to be a high volume, move it around type of guy. And he was still productive, but it didn't feel as good with Chase, but he could do it all. I think he showed he could do it all, right? He could play the high end possession game, and he's this big play receiver. And the other thing that you and I kept saying about Chase through the years, not that he's sneaky fast, but his speed always seems to sneak up on the rest of the NFL, whether it's after the catch, whether it's down the field. Chase always plays faster, I think, than he feels. But then I think when you add Jefferson, the fact that Jefferson over the course of his career across multiple quarterbacks has averaged 15 yards per catch, that's a huge number in today's NFL. 15 yards per catch. Used to have a lot more guys averaging that much, but Jefferson's been able to do that with his slick route running, with moving around. He has the contested catch ability, some of the freak catches that he's made as well. I just think he's the best. I just think he's the top guy by like a smidge over Chase. And AJ Brown's not just go ahead. I'll let you respond to Jefferson here.
Yeah, I mean, ironically, he's not a blazing fast guy. Like, he's fast. What did he run? Like a 4.4 flat-ish, something like that. So he's not like a 4.2, 4.3 guy. But the thing that Jefferson does, I think, really, really well is, like, he eats up a vertical cushion every single time. He terrifies corners. When you start looking at the tape, whether it's from the slot or whether it's out wide, like, he, over the first 10 yards, gets so much vertical distance that DBs are put in real trouble really quickly. And then he can exploit that to either take it deep with route running. He's really good at those head fakes, sending guys in different directions, or those in-breaking routes, those deep digs over the middle. Like, he gets so much separation because those guys are on skates because of how much vertical movement he gets right off the snap. And ironically, like, if you were picturing the two, you would imagine that was the thing that Chase would be better at. But actually, I think Jefferson is that. Where I think
Chase is more of a late separator, right? Or he accelerates late, but he also knows how to separate late using his hands, using everything.
Well, where I'm starting to think that the sort of sneaky, deceptive element of Chase's speed is, I think it's because it's part of that thing I talked about before, where it's like how much he varies the pace of his routes. But I think it's also when he goes from gear to gear, it looks easy. Like, he doesn't, some guys, when they get to the acceleration phase, like, you can see how much effort they're putting into it. It's like quarterbacks, right? Like, Ryan Fitzpatrick and Baker Mayfield are in the same category of every throw they make looks like it's hard, right? I think this is why some people think Baker Mayfield doesn't have a good arm, because it looks like he's trying, even though that's producing like an insanely powerful throw. So whether it's hard for him or it isn't, like, the end result is that's a howitzer. But it looks harder than some quarterbacks that are able to just sort of flick the ball. and it doesn't look like they're putting much effort into it. And that's where they get their power from. Some players, when they're like really working at accelerating or running fast, like it looks like they're putting effort into it. Jefferson looks like he's running fast when he's running fast. Whereas when Chase goes from gear to gear and hits the accelerator, it barely registers. Like you don't even notice he's doing it. You just suddenly realize, oh, he's just blown past a dude that was in phase with him a second ago. He must have like hit the jets. I think that's the thing that's so deceptive about him, is it's very difficult to work out when he's mashed his foot on the gas, but when it happens, it's insanely effective.
So you said you were kind of regretting Chase at the end after watching the film. So would you have put Jefferson here?
I don't know. I think, as I said, I think those two are the obvious two. I think Nico Collins deserves to be in the conversation as well. I think AJ Brown does as well. AJ Brown is just like, he's almost a classic throwback receiver where he's just so big and so fast that's his superpower. Like he's physically so much more imposing than almost everybody he's going up against, and that's incredibly difficult to stop.
Yeah. So AJ Brown is very much in the conversation for me. I think we're talking top tier receivers. He's absolutely right in there with Justin Jefferson and AJ Brown. I mean, Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. But AJ Brown, so I said Justin Jefferson has been QB proof over from what we've seen, right? These are all small sample sizes, but he went through from Kirk Cousins to the revolving door of 2023 to Sam Darnold last year. Production's always there. Jamar Chase has had the benefit of having Joe Burrow and doing it through multiple roles. AJ Brown has elevated a Titans offense, and his presence coincided with career years for Ryan Tannehill. And I think, you could say, well, that was Derrick Henry, that was the run game, that was Arthur Smith. I think AJ Brown was the biggest driver there. And then immediately goes to the Eagles, and Jalen Hurts looks like a completely different quarterback from a production standpoint. And we don't get to see a whole lot of Jalen Hurts without AJ Brown right now. But he has elevated two offenses, helped bring the Titans to an AFC championship with a run first team, but a very efficient pass game, and the Eagles going to 2 Super Bowls and winning one. And I think he's huge there. And his production, I don't think will ever match the other guys, because he doesn't need to, because they're going to run the ball a little bit more in Philadelphia, because he does have a Devontae Smith on the other side, and Hurts just isn't a high volume passer. Just it's not the way the Eagles play. But I think AJ Brown is an absolute game changer. If we were doing this a year ago, Tyreek Hill would have been on the list,
right.
But he didn't look the same last year. And when you were saying, hey, there's always a clear number one wide receiver in the NFL, I was just thinking back to the last 15 years or so. I think there was a good, healthy debate between Julio Jones and Antonio Brown for a period of time. I think there was a point where DeAndre Hopkins took over, a point where Devontae Adams took over. But when it was Hopkins and Adams, Tyreek Hill was the guy that I would want. If we were starting a team for about a 5-year stretch, it was Tyreek Hill. And if he did completely lose a step last year and that's over, fine. But if he's back, if he's fast again and healthy, he's on this list. And still could be, like, if this was 2 years ago, he's number one for me, because I still think Tyreek Hill is the scariest deep threat in the NFL. We were joking. Our friend Anthony Tresh a couple of years ago, when he was writing for PFF, said best deep threat of all time, and everybody's like, kid, you haven't seen enough. I mean, he's in there. He's in that Randy Moss. He's in that best Don Hudson conversation, Sam. But then he's in the conversation at least. And then the fact that I think he could catch 150 balls if you just made him a slot receiver. Tyreek Hill's in this conversation if he's healthy, but he's at the point in his career where he just might get nicked up too much and may never be able to bounce back to where he was.
Yeah, I mean, I just think he didn't look the same physically last year. And for a guy who, it's not like that's all he brought to the table, but his production, his effectiveness was so predicated on being the most physically impressive player in the NFL. I doubt that comes back. You're right. If it does, then he's in the conversation, definitely. The player that I would be more interested in whether he bounces back is Devontae Adams, because his skill was always based off being a technician. A, he still has that. We saw that last year with the Jets. B, he's now going to a destination in the Rams where he's got the quarterback, he's got the coach, he's got Puka Nacua on the other side, and we should at least mention Puka Nacua as well as a guy that could be in this conversation. But I think the stage is set actually for Devontae Adams to have a bounce back season if he has that within him at his age, because he used to be, the best wide receiver in the NFL. And then I guess one other name that should probably be brought up is CeeDee Lamb, who's got a lot of these skills as well. The one interesting thing, by the way, when you're going through all these guys, Jefferson, Chase, AJ Brown, all these top, Nico Collins, the common thread throughout all of them is how incredibly good they are at coming back to the quarterback. And even if it's only the last step before the ball arrives, like a half movement right at the end, they are all so good at working their way back to the quarterback. Like the number of passes that would not be complete if they didn't make that little movement back to the quarterback is nuts. And to the point where it almost made me, like, watching all these guys sequentially, number one, it made you sort of realize that's a big part of the difference between some of these guys in the NFL and the college game. But number two, it makes you realize how important that is. Like, obviously, it's something the coaches harp on at, and, we know is important. But it's only when you start stringing it back to back to back to back and you watch them all, and you're like, these guys are all amazingly good at this. Uh-oh.
That was some of the nuance to Jordan Adderley liked. I think he's QB. You losing me now? When receivers don't do it well, it really sticks out. It really sticks out. And years of every time a quarterback throws a pick six and it looks awful, a lot of the time you can go look at the receiver and say they didn't work back to the ball well enough. So my internet should be great over here. What's going on? You guys have been glitching this entire time on StreamYard. I'm here. We're back.
Yeah, there it is.
All right. So
by the way,
go ahead.
One thing about Jefferson's route running in particular, Jerry Rice used to say, like, his quest was to make every route look the same, off the line. Look, Jerry Rice, the greatest of all time. It's hard to disagree with Jerry Rice when he says anything, but I certainly in today's NFL, I just don't think that that's the case. Like, you're not, the routes are so predicated off like down and distance, situation, split from the line, all these kinds of things. Like, immediately you're clearly not running the same route as the last play because of the alignment, because of the distribution of the defense, because of the down and distance, all these kinds of things. So I don't think it makes any sense essentially to say the deep post I'm running right now should look the same off the line as like the 5-yard out we were running on the last play, because already it's not going to, based off how you're lined up and all those kinds of things. But I think what you really should be trying to do is what Jefferson is incredibly good at, which is just make it look like something else, right? Make the DB think you're running, like make them think they know what it is that you're running, and then immediately turn that into something completely different. There was a play where it was a scramble drill. I forget who it was against. Scramble drill in the end zone, where immediately you see a lot of times in the back of the end zone, like a receiver was running like a corner route, play breaks down, and you see them reverse course, right? And that's when they spring open. But the DB knows you're doing that. So if he's able to at least stay with that first move, he can basically, tackle you in that plaster defense and take you out of the play. So what Jefferson did is he made that initial move, and then immediately it was a one-step move, and then he bounced right back to the corner again, and it gained him, like, the DB basically fell over. Like, he's like, oh, I know what he's doing. Tried to go with him, and then when he made the move back, immediately falls over. Jefferson's just able to walk to the pylon and like wave for 5 seconds until the ball arrived and got himself a touchdown. He is so good at being like, it doesn't matter what the release looks like. It just matters that I can make him think the route is something completely different to what it is, because that's when he's going to commit the hardest to the fake, to the thing that isn't what we're actually running.
Yeah, so I have Jefferson. You have Chase. I'd say receiver is probably the healthiest debate if you're just choosing a number one. CeeDee Lamb, you gave a shout out. I agree with that. As far as next players, who could be on this list in the future? You mentioned Puka Nacua. That was my choice. Who's your choice? You mentioned a lot of other players, but is there anyone else you would want to mention future best receiver in the NFL?
I think a lot of the guy, like the last year's crop, right? I think Malik Neighbors would be in that conversation. I think maybe we'll see this year, but like a a beef caked up Marvin Harrison Jr. might still be in that conversation. We'll see what the David Boston offseason workout plan of just piling on muscle is going to do for him. But Brian Thomas Jr., I think, based off last season, looked potentially special. The size, speed, explosiveness that he brings to the table is like it's a different type of stuff, but it's like it's in the AJ Brown world of like there's no DB that can go with that. Like he's bigger, he's faster, he's more explosive than you are, and that's immediately difficult to cover, even if he isn't any good at running routes, and he is.
All right, Sam, let's go tight end. Who's the best tight end in the NFL? We're on pace for a 3-hour show. We got this. We're back, baby.
Well, some of them, I think there's a lot less discussion than others.
Yeah.
So with the decline in Travis Kelce, I think the best tight end in the NFL now is pretty inarguably George Kittle.
I agree. I'm also going George Kittle. I think there was a point where there was a healthy debate between Travis Kelce and George Kittle, and you could say, well, Kittle's run blocking and he plays more in line and Kelce gets fed. And then you'd say, well, what if Kittle played in the Chiefs offense and had that type of volume as Travis Kelce? We would see some special numbers from Kittle. The fact that he's a part of a well-rounded offense where they're going to spread the ball around, I think that's always going to hurt Kittle's production. But at the same time, his versatility as a run blocker and a guy that you could move around, because you just see those games like when George Kittle takes over, good luck, but he's had to share with Debo, with Ayuk, with McCaffrey. But when he takes over, it's as good as any tight end in the NFL. So I agree, it's Kittle. Some of the fun names as far as who it could be, that's probably the best part of the tight end conversation. But I think it's Kittle right now, as Kelce certainly looked like he lost a couple steps last year. It was efficient. He knew how to get open. The difference with Kelce last year, I think he could still get open, just couldn't do anything after the catch. Just had, he was getting tackled. Whereas in the past, he would create a big play. So you could see the difference in Kelce last season.
Yeah. And look, you can't put Brock Bowers as the best tight end in the NFL over George Kittle unless you say, I don't care about run blocking at all, right? Because the difference between the two of them in that regard is absurd. Now, they're going to use Brock Bowers in a different way, but like he can't do any of the blocks that George Kittle can do. And Kittle is one of the best blocking tight ends in the NFL. If that's all he did, we're having blocking tight ends, right? The value that the NFL places on those guys is crazy. I mean, look what the contract the Vikings just gave Josh Oliver. When we talk to Zach Robinson, you hear him big up blocking tight ends. Like those guys value blockers at that position way more than the fantasy football playing world does, than the media does, than the general fans do. Those guys are important. And George Kittle is one of the best blocking tight ends in the NFL. If that's all he did, and he's also one of the best receiving tight ends in the NFL as well. Like Kittle is the best the way Gronk was the best, right? Where he could on one play torch a safety or even a cornerback and, make a 50-yard play or run after the catch or whatever it is. And then on the very next play, come back and like pancake a defensive end, right? That's the stuff that Kittle can do. I don't know if there's another tight end in the NFL that can do that anymore. Kelce, was never in that category. Gronk was at his peak. Bowers is certainly not in that category. Laporta would be the closest maybe, or Mark Andrews, but I don't think either of those guys are as good as Kittle at either aspect, really.
If you're going to debate Bowers and Kittle, look, it's 1 year. Bowers had all the volume, broke the tight end reception record. He averaged 10.7 yards per catch, Bowers, which is fine. Kittle for his career has averaged 13.7 yards per catch. That is a receiver number at tight end. That's not just one season, but 15.7 2 years ago, 14.2 last year. Those are receiver numbers, yards per reception, that Kittle has averaged. Jamar Chase has averaged the same, 13.7 for his career. So that's how good Kittle has been. So that's why I think if you took Kittle and put him into a high volume passing offense, or put him into Brock Bowers' situation with the Raiders where they had Jacoby Myers to throw to and that was it, or put him in Kelce's role, yeah, he'd catch 115, 120 balls, but maybe for a little bit more, big time plays down the field. So look, I think Bowers is the guy that if we're saying who's going to be on this list in the future, Bowers has to have his name there. I love Brock Bowers, but George Kittle has been special. And I almost underrated because Kelsey's had better numbers, and he's not as good as Gronk in Gronk's prime, right? So as far as that dual threat tight end, Gronk, I think, was always better than Kittle. I don't think he's reached Gronk's prime, but Kittle's been the best dual threat tight end since Gronk retired. And if you would put him in a high volume offense, I think you'd see crazy numbers.
Yeah, and some of those sort of numbers are, they're offense dependent, obviously, right? With Shanahan and with having better quarterback play. I think if you were only interested in receiving skills, Brock Bowers would be in this conversation. He's more of a slot receiver than he is a tight end, honestly. But if you're looking for the best tight end in the NFL, the blocking is a huge separator. Even if you would say Brock Bowers and Kittle, they're different receiving style players, but let's call them equal, right? Even if you were willing to say that, Kittle is one of the best blockers in the NFL, a tight end, and Brock Bowers is not, right? So that it's a massive separator between the two of them.
By the way, I got to see where the blocking grade. It's still not great for Bowers, but even then you have to adjust. So if you were just going to cite PFF grades, which we do often on the show, tight end run blocking probably needs as much context as any other grade, because if you are if you're a slot, just trying to grab a safety, or if you're a move tight end, you just have an easier role than if you're being asked to block defensive ends in line. So I just caution people, if you're going to use run blocking grades for tight ends, especially understand the role, and that when you have a George Kittle, you could just do more offensively. So that is why he's number one for both of us. If we're talking about the guy that could be on the list going forward, Brock Bowers is number one for both of us as well.
Yeah, I think Brock Bowers is the obvious name there. Trey McBride, I don't know if you would put him, I don't know which category you would fall into, whether you would just call him one of the best tight ends in the NFL already, or if he's one of the future guys. Mark Andrews, I know, he's unfortunately at the moment, the only thing anyone remembers Mark Andrews for right now is a drop that cost him a playoff game, but he's been one of the best tight ends in the NFL. Walt in the chat, by the way, says, he doesn't remember a tight end ever getting into the Hall because of blocking. When Rob Gronkowski goes into the Hall of Fame as a tight end, blocking is going to be front and center in terms of his case. Now, obviously, he's got a Hall of Fame case anyway, just from his receiving numbers and touchdowns and yada, yada. But Gronk himself has said, I want to be remembered for the blocks, right? I don't care about these runs and the catches and the touchdowns. I want to see my highlight blocks. That's the thing that I took the most pleasure in. And when you hear people making his case, like the journalists that make the case for these players in the Hall of Fame, people are absolutely going to use Gronk's blocking as a differentiator. That is what made him special as opposed to just productive.
Belichick will say the same. If Belichick does the induction speech, he'll be like, yeah, he had some great catches, but did you see him block? Did you see what we could do with him offensively as a blocker? When you mentioned Trey McBride, where does he go on the list? I said a future number one, a year from now, if Kittle regresses a little bit, McBride if he has another great year, he's in the conversation, right? He'll be battling Brock Bowers for the number one spot as soon as Kittle declines. So yeah, I think Trey McBride absolutely deserves a mention. Let's go offensive line now. We didn't go left and right tackle. We just went overall offensive tackle here. This was a tough one for me as well. Where'd you go with tackle?
Yeah, I think you could reasonably argue that Trent Williams is still the best left tackle, or still the best tackle in the NFL. I'm dinging him though, because I think he's now entered the Tyron Smith, Teron Armstead category of he's only going to play 75% of the season. He's basically going to be hurt for a few games every year now. And so I think you probably have to say he's only 75% of the player he could be, because he's not going to play a chunk of the games. I think Lane Johnson is still the best tackle in the NFL now. Right tackle, I don't think that matters anymore. But Lane Johnson's he's so good at everything. He's got the size, he's got the athleticism, he's almost never scrambling. He's just never beaten to the point where he's in trouble. And he gets less help than I think any other tackle in the NFL. Whether it's by alignment, whether it's by where the line slides, they leave him on an island and they say, go lock your guy down, and we trust you to do that. The Eagles do that with both tackles to an extent, but Mailata gets more help than Lane Johnson, and Mailata doesn't get much help.
Yeah, he is special to watch in pass protection. I think, and if you watch Mailata, it's funny because I went back and watched some early Mailata just to see what he looks like now, and you could see his pass set starting to morph into what Lane Johnson's doing. I mean, Lane Johnson is so explosive. Remember when he came out, he went, I think, number 4 overall coming out of Oklahoma, way back in 2013, and he tested really well. He was an incredible athlete. Doesn't always matter at the position, but it shows up in his pass sets, his athleticism. He's always in good position, and I think that's what separates a lot of tackles is just always being prepared for every move, for a bull rush, for a guy trying to win the edge or a guy trying to counter you. Always in position, has all the counters, and then he mixes up his pass sets, right? He knows his weaknesses as well. Like, he gets beaten inside sometimes. Everybody loses. He knows where his weaknesses are, and so you could see him mix it up. When he's facing power, he'll go, short set him. He'll go attack him. So he mixes things up extremely well. He's good in the run game as well. I think he doesn't get a ton of help in the run game either. They leave him on an island on backside zone blocks a ton, and those are his losses, but he's really good in the run game. So I would say, so what's the debate here? I think Trent Williams is a fair debate, and it's a fair point that you bring. I think his run blocking is exceptional. Pass blocking, outstanding as well. It's just a matter of being on the field. So I think Trent Williams is very much in the conversation. Tristan Wirfs, I've seen his name come up a couple times. Absolutely in the conversation. All around, does it all. Did it at right tackle, did it at left tackle. Tristan Wirfs is the guy that I listed as future number 1. When Lane Johnson regresses, I think Wirfs is the next guy potentially to take over. I see Penei Sewell's name come up.
Yeah.
But my one concern, I think Penei Sewell is one of the best run game weapons in the NFL. And Ben Johnson used him well, pulling out in space, power at the line of scrimmage. He can do it all, make every block. They run this diverse run scheme in Detroit, and Sewell executes it all. He's not as clean in pass protection as some of those other guys. He will lose on an island a little bit more than the Trent Williams, the Lane Johnsons, the Tristan Wirfs of the world. That's the one thing I think separating Sewell from some of those top guys right now.
Yeah. I mean, just to put some numbers to that, according to PFF, last season, Penei Sewell gave up 28 pressures at tackle. Lane Johnson gave up 10 with less help, right? Like, Lane Johnson has the toughest assignment in the NFL in terms of pass blocking. They completely leave him on an island and say, you are one-on-one all the time. Do your job. So with significantly less help, he gave up about a third of the amount of pressure that Penei Sewell did at tackle. So, yeah, look, Sewell is an incredibly good player, and particularly in the run game. Like, him and Mailata, I think, are vaguely comparable in that regard. But Lane Johnson is a different level in terms of pass blocking.
Yeah, and to be clear on this one, I think it's close between Lane Johnson, Trent Williams, Tristan Wirfs. I think as far as future number 1s, Penei Sewell's in the mix. Wirfs, who I just mentioned, Jordan Mailata is in the mix. That dude continues to get better. Like, I'm not putting a ceiling on how good Jordan Mailata can become, because he's still getting better. And he's learning from Lane Johnson. And you can actually see it in his game, the way he plays. He is learning from his, teammate on the other side. Like, Jordan Mailata easily could be the top guy on this list in the future.
Jordan Mailata last year had a 95, 96 PFF grade. It was like off the charts insane. And as you said, remember, this guy was playing rugby 7 years ago. Like, his NFL career is basically his football career. So he's only been playing the game for like 6 years. And the 6th of those years was like the best tackle in the NFL.
All right, let's go guard. Best guard in the NFL here, Sam.
Tough one, I think. The best guards in the NFL. It's another one where we've had a pun intended changing of the guard, with all these old guys retiring or moving on or whatever. Zach Martin would have been up there for years. I would give it to Joe Thuney. His season last year, like, if you want to look at grades or pressures or whatever, you can't really use last season because he was playing left tackle for half of it. The fact that he was playing left tackle for half of it, and the Chiefs believed that their best option at left tackle was their left guard, I think says some pretty impressive stuff about Joe Thuney. He's, I think, definitely the best pass blocking guard in the NFL. His run blocking, I think, is more than good enough to put him in the conversation overall. I would give it to Joe Thuney. I think there's a few names that are in the mix, but he's one of them.
Yeah, I went a little. Thuney is definitely in the mix there. If you were looking at grades over the last couple of years, it's probably Chris Lindstrom from the Falcons. I did not go with Lindstrom, but I think he's been in an outside zone system with Arthur Smith, with Zach Robinson, that just fit his skill set extremely well. It's been run heavy. I think he's been a little protected as far as pass protection goes. I'm going Quentin Nelson from the Colts. And look, I thought his trajectory was going to be like Zach Martin, right? Like by year 2, he's sitting there battling Zach Martin to be the best guard in the NFL. There was a bit of a dip in Nelson's play. I don't think he's been as dominant, but he still is very, very good. I mean, last year per PFF, lowest percentage of negatively graded blocks. And when you look at his positives, when you go watch Jonathan Taylor's big plays, Anthony Richardson's big plays in the run game, it is Quentin Nelson. He is an explosive run blocker. So with Thuney, as you said, probably the best pass protector. And the fact that you could put Thuney out at left tackle and he could hold his own, unbelievable, right? Most guards can't do that. But Nelson's run blocking is absolutely exceptional. He is explosive. He is unreal at the second level. His highlight reel of taking out linebackers and leading to those big plays, those big runs, he is outstanding. So I think Nelson is still number 1 for me. I think it's close between him, Thuney, and Lindstrom, but I went with Quentin Nelson for this one.
Yeah, I mean, a few years ago, if this was one of those ones where you're like, in 2025, who will the best guard in the NFL be? You would have put all of your money at ridiculously stupid odds on Quentin Nelson being that guy. But he did regress, and he hasn't been the dominant force that he was supposed to be, and it's at least a conversation. So, yeah, I mean, he'd definitely be one of the names on there. A couple of people in the chat have thrown it out, and I think it's a name worth throwing out, definitely. Quinn Miners has become a player in the conversation, maybe. A third-round pick out of Wisconsin Whitewater. Remember, he went famous. Was that the COVID
Football
year
Factory,
where he's got like all these not highlight reels, all these like social media clips of him like blocking trees, like pass sets against trees in his home. But since coming to the NFL, like he's number 1, started from very early on. Every year of his career has gotten better in terms of PFF grades, and the numbers overall went from a 67 grade as a rookie, 77.7 year 2, 83.7 year 3, and then last season 88.2 with really good 80+ grades in both run blocking and pass protection for the first time. So he's at least putting himself in that conversation right now. And with another year, like if he just has another season of playing, particularly the pass blocking, if his pass blocking stays at the level it was last year for another year, I think you could easily make that argument.
So Miners is a potential guy. I see the chat, and you may be mentioning Tyler Smith. Is he the best Tyler offensive lineman in Dallas? I think he is.
Yeah, I mean, Tyler Smith, I think, has already shown a really high ceiling at guard. I struggle to find like a really young guy that I was sort of confident in saying could be one of the best in 3, 4, 5 years time. So I ended up going with Tyler Smith as that guy.
Let's go center. Who are you going for the best center in the NFL?
Another one where I think it's fairly comfortably Creed Humphrey now at this stage. Jason Kelsey's retired. Frank Ragnow is retired. Like most of the guys you would have said are in this conversation over the last 5 years are no longer there. So it basically leaves Creed Humphrey, I would say, fairly comfortably. I'd say there's one other person that's reasonably close, but Humphrey.
Yeah, I'm also going Creed Humphrey. I mean, Frank Ragnow retiring takes him out of the mix. I think there'd be a conversation there with Ragnow. Humphrey is just so stout, man. I mean, it's just a wide body that plays wide, I guess is the way I describe it. He's difficult to get around as a pass protector and moves people in the run game. And he's just been extremely consistent. When we talk about this Chiefs run, and it's obviously very flashy with Patrick Mahomes and Chris Jones, and Humphrey has stepped in and almost immediately become right off the bat became one of the best centers in the NFL. And then if you were debating him and Kelsey, you'd have to say, well, they're completely different players and stylistically, and Kelsey Kelsey's this offensive weapon who moves like a linebacker, but Humphrey, he could do it all. Like the only knock on Humphrey are his snaps. Like he has those bouts where he's just like bad snaps or lobbing the snap and it's too slow getting to Mahomes or whatever. But there's really no knocks to Creed Humphrey's game.
No, I mean, he's been in the NFL for 4 years, and in 3 of those years, he's had a PFF grade above 90. That's pretty ridiculous. Like, he's an incredibly powerful player, doesn't get beaten very often as a pass blocker. Like you said, basically, the only flaw is occasionally there's some snapping problems, and that's something that a lot of centers deal with as well. Like, it's kind of the hidden, quiet part of the game that can differentiate a lot of these guys, but I don't think there's another player that can really rival his consistency over the last 4 years.
How about who's next? Who could overtake Creed Humphrey in the coming years?
I think Tyler Linderbaum is one where, again, I wasn't sure where to put him in the categories, kind of like Trey McBride. Like, is he in the conversation as like already a really good center, like an honorable mention he'd be the second guy, right? I think Linderbaum right now is the second best center in the NFL, but he's been in the league for a few years. Is he already too old to be the future? If I'm going for the future, Zach Frazier from Pittsburgh last season was really, really good as a rookie. And that's not just the Steelers tradition of once they start a center, a rookie center, that guy's immediately anointed as the next Hall of Famer. He was really good. So I could imagine Zach Frazier becoming one of the best. I don't know if I can see him overhauling Creed Humphrey, but certainly putting himself in the conversation in a year or two.
Yeah, I think Humphrey's the guy for the foreseeable future, but I put down Linderbaum. He's definitely a tick below in pass protection than Creed. Different types of players. Again, Linderbaum's I think he's a run game weapon as well. But Humphrey's just, I mean, he's going to be the guy, I think, for the foreseeable future. But yeah, Frazier's a good shout too. Really good. I mean, if you hit the ground running as a rookie like he did, much like Creed Humphrey does, bodes well. So I think Frazier's going to be one of the top guys for a while here. All right, that's the offense. We ready?
Mm-hmm.
Defense. The best edge rusher in the NFL. We might need an hour on this one. Who is the best edge rusher in the NFL?
I don't know what we do anymore. I think there's obviously a group that are very tightly close together, but I think at this point it's becoming consensus now that the best edge rusher in the NFL is the guy that it's been for the last few years, and it's Myles Garrett. And finally, we're seeing, defensive player of the year. Like, we're seeing it, the stats, the consensus, and the awards catch up to what I think has been the reality for a while, that there's nobody that can do what Myles Garrett can do. Like, he's the Saquon Barkley of the edge rusher position in terms of he's the most physically gifted of any of these guys. And like Saquon Barkley, who you put him on the Eagles and suddenly we've got a 2,000-yard season on our hands, Myles Garrett, with a bit of help around him, has become a defensive player of the year statistically, in addition to just being down to down, playing like one.
So that was what you said earlier. You said Saquon was the most gifted. And in these conversations, physically gifted, right. In these conversations, I usually hate that because it's usually attached to quarterback, right? When the quarterback debates come up, you'll say, oh, this is the most talented quarterback. This is the most talent. This guy's the most talent. And I'm like, that doesn't mean anything. That means nothing. It really means nothing. Because at the end of the day, you have to produce. And if you're ranking quarterbacks, how well they play the position is what matters, not how talented they are theoretically. At edge, if you say most physically gifted, it kind of matters because it shows up on the field. So it's Myles Garrett for me as well. The strain that he puts on offensive tackles and offensive coordinators is like no one else in the league. I mean, look, there's a top tier of edge rushers, of which Micah Parsons, TJ Watt, Nick Bosa, Max Crosby, Trey Hendrickson. Like, there's a top tier. I don't think anyone stresses defense or offenses the way Myles Garrett does. The number of times, like I see tackles completely changing their pass sets just to handle his speed burst off the line. The number of times that he is 3 steps into his rush and the tackle's just not even completely, not even close to finishing his pass set, it's crazy. And so the extra attention that he gets, the extra attention that he needs to get, and then just having every tool as far as rushing the passer. He's got the speed to power. He has the the speed to get to the edge. Again, it's like 3 steps in and you're cooked. And I just think Garrett is absolutely the best. Of course, it won't always show up in sack totals, and I think that's okay, right? To clarify for the 1,000th time, sacks are a great end result. They're what you want as a pass rusher, but it's not the only way to produce. And so if you're merely using that number, you're missing out on the 95% of the other plays. And when we're talking about on all the plays, who makes the biggest impact, who is the most difficult to block, it is Myles Garrett. He's the best edge rusher in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, elite physical tools are a differentiator when we're talking about, the best players, but it's not like you need to be good already, right? It's not like this is the problem when we talk about drafting sometimes is we chase the guy that's an elite physical skill set who isn't a good player, right? It's like based off this physical skill set, he can become a good player. And if he becomes a good player because of this physical skill set, he's like better than the other guy, the random sort of alternate history guy. When you start talking about already elite NFL players, like everybody we're mentioning right now is a top tier NFL player. They are the best of the best. They're already exceptionally productive players. When you're talking about this group and one guy separates physically from that group, that's something to consider. Like AJ Brown is athletically freaky, even related to some of these other elite receivers. And that makes him a problem on every single down for a defender to have to deal with. Same thing is true with Myles Garrett. Like of this entire group, all of whom are incredibly athletic, incredibly productive, and incredibly good, Myles Garrett uniquely scares offensive linemen because he can do things none of the other guys can do. That Euro step that he has where he can basically just teleport across an entire gap with one step. Nobody else can do that. Micah Parsons has got incredible speed. TJ Watt has got incredible bend. Like all these other guys can do various other freaky things, but nobody can do that. And more to the point, the guy trying to block it can't do that either. So when Myles Garrett pulls that out of the bag, every single offensive lineman in the NFL immediately craps themselves because they can't go with it, right? And that has to be relevant.
I would like to, in this world of we can measure everything and you've got, exit velocities for baseball and, pitch movement and everything. I would love to know Myles Garrett's stride length relative to the rest of the NFL. That's when I'm talking about like 3 steps and he's on people. I think that's what surprises tackles all the time. And they panic. Like you said, his stride length is incredible. So we both have Myles Garrett. Who else is at least in the debate in this top tier? Do you have a number 2? Who would you say is the number 2 edge rusher if we're both taking Myles Garrett?
I don't know that I have one. I think the next group. So it used to be, I think a year or two ago, you would say the entire top group is extremely difficult to separate, right? And in any given year, you could be picking 2 of Myles Garrett, Micah Parsons, TJ Watt, Nick Bosa, Max Crosby, maybe. And now maybe you would throw Aiden Hutchinson into that group as well. Like the group is expanding, maybe, if anything. But a couple of years ago, you would say, in any year, it's just 2 of that group, right? Now I think it's become Myles Garrett is number 1. And the debate is now in any given year, 2 or 3 is whoever you want it to be. Like Nick Bosa could be that next year. Max Crosby could be that next year. Micah Parsons, TJ Watt, Aiden Hutchinson, if he comes back at the same level he was at before that leg break. That's where I think the separation isn't there. It's just in any given season who's going to have that year.
Yeah, I think for me, if I had to choose, I would go Micah Parsons as the second best. I think I'll probably choose him as Defensive Player of the Year for the 3rd straight time. He'll get that at some point. He'll be in that. He'll have that 20+ sack season, and he's not as dangerous as Garrett, but it's close. TJ Watt, I think, is absolutely special in that there are times that he kind of guesses as a rusher and he'll kind of peel off and try to read the quarterback. But like, as far as winning one-on-ones and winning clean one-on-ones and finishing, TJ Watt might be the absolute best. Now that's obviously an extremely valuable skill, but he also has that knack for game on the line. If you leave me on an island, I'm going to win it and I'm going to finish it and I'm going to seal the deal. There's something to it, right? It's not enough for me to put him over Garrett, because I think Garrett's snap for snap is just better. It's just better. But TJ Watt's special. Trey Hendrickson had a similar aspect to his game last year. If you leave me one-on-one, I'm going to win cleanly and finish the play with a sack. Hendrickson and Watt both do that extremely well. Nick Bosa, who you mentioned, I think is, in that snap for snap conversation with Parsons for the 2. What about a next group here? Who could be number 1 on this list in the future?
Yeah, I think if I had to pick a second guy, it would be Nick Bosa. Again, Aiden Hutchinson is in that world of, what do you call him? Is he already in that elite category, or is he the future? He could easily be the future because he's only been in the league for a couple of years at this point, but he's been dominant. Last season, again, I've said it before, I think he would have won Defensive Player of the Year last year if he hadn't broken his leg. And part of that is he was playing out of his mind. Part of that is he wasn't going to face a good tackle basically for the entirety of the year. And so his stats would have been mind-blowing over the course of the full season. The only other guy that you would throw into that category, I think, based off how he performed last year, is Jared Verse. He's a little bit more one-dimensional at the moment than some of these other guys, but he might already be the best power rusher in the NFL, certainly from an edge rusher position. If he adds a couple more moves or sort of varieties of beating people, he could absolutely put himself into this category.
Yeah, Verse, people are going to be so scared of his power this year. That's going to open things up. I can't wait to see how Verse counters with a little bit more speed to the edge, inside moves, counters. I think there's definitely some opportunity for Verse to take a step forward here. I see people mentioning Max Crosby. I think his play took a bit of a hit last year, and I don't think his pass rushing's ever really been at the same level as some of these top guys. He's great. I mean, he's a top 5, 6, 7 edge rusher, whatever you want to call him, but probably a tick below some of those other guys. I love watching Crosby. I mean, it's like a absolute battle trying to block him every single time. Edge rushers deep, love it. Defensive tackle. So we split. I see the chat theorizing what's going on. We have a nose tackle position. So we split defensive tackle and nose tackle. So let's start with your traditional defensive tackle, your 3 tech or your 3 to 5 tech, whatever you want to call it. Defensive interior player, non-nose tackle. Who's the best?
Yeah, this is another one where I think it's become a much easier conversation than it's been in previous years or some previous years. Obviously, it was Aaron Donald for a decade. And then it became like the interesting conversation when it was Donald was who's the second best guy.
Who's number 2?
Yeah, and I think that might be true now as well, where I think Chris Jones, once Donald is retired, Chris Jones just assumed the mantle as the best three tech type tackle. I think he is that guy.
Who were all the best number 2 defensive tackles in the Aaron Donald era, right? We had Fletcher Cox for a period. Then it was Chris Jones. Cam Hayward maybe had an argument at one point. Are those the 3? Am I missing anyone? Can you
Geno
remember?
Atkins for a year or two was
maybe
in that
Geno
bucket.
But we used to always debate that, like who's the second best defensive tackle behind Donald. I'm with you on Chris Jones as the best. I still think the number of times, first off, that he's one-on-one. When he's one-on-one, he wins. And the number of times that he kicks outside in a key situation and beats tackles, good tackles too. He's not always beating up on just bad tackles. He'll go up against anybody. Yeah. So he'll win on the edge. He'll pick his spots. And so he's still just an absolute game wrecker. I think Jalen Carter is he's both the number 2 and the next guy that's going to be number 1 on this list. Yeah. Thought he started a little slow last year against the run, but after that, you just see the explosion in his hands, the get off, and he's going to be the guy that you're going to be afraid to leave one-on-one because he'll make you pay. And he was doing that right from the get-go as a rookie. But yeah, I think just stacking a few more elite years and Carter becomes the next number 1 here.
Yeah, agreed. This might be reflecting more on the Chiefs at this point, given a couple of the, what they did with Joe Thuney last year. Remember, they're only a couple of years removed from deciding that Chris Jones, the 315-pound defensive tackle, was legitimately their best edge rusher, like moving him full-time to the edge and deciding that he was the best edge rusher they had. And honestly, I think they were right. Like, I think they were correct in the analysis that he was the best edge rusher on the roster. Where I think that they were wrong, and I think they, realized that and changed, is the net result of that was not a positive one, right? They are better with Chris Jones playing inside predominantly and patching together the edge rusher spot than they were moving Chris Jones to the edge as their best edge rusher and then patching together the interior. But the point is, for a guy to be a 315-pound defensive tackle and also be the team's best edge rusher is utterly ridiculous and speaks to the ability that he has, which he's still able to do every now and again, where he just decides, I'm going to go wreck this tackle for giggles in, on 3rd and 10 midway through the game. And it works at a stupidly regular basis. Like, he is the best guy since Aaron Donald retired. And honestly, he was actually bridging the gap between like the rest of the league and Aaron Donald. Over the last couple of years of Donald's career, Chris Jones was getting pretty close to him. I think you're right. Number 2 is Jalen Carter. He's not as consistent, but he's really the only guy that can match Chris Jones for just what he's able to do. Maybe you would say, the peak games of Jeffrey Simmons is in that category, and Quinnen Williams has been at that level as well, but both those guys have sort of fallen off a little bit. Carter is the guy that if he puts it together, if he just eliminates the stretches where he's not dominant, he can definitely get into that group.
Yeah, I think those are the clear names. I don't think there's anyone really. There's a lot of good defensive tackles that are good to very good, but the Chris Jones, Jalen Carter is the 2 clear elite guys in the NFL right now. I think makes the most sense. Anyone else you wanted to mention?
Just in terms of the future, I don't see a ton of the obvious sort of future names that I would throw out there. The rookies from this year will all be fascinating to watch. It was a really good and deep defensive tackle group. And then Tavondre Sweat from a year ago, and I'm specifically putting him in the defensive tackle category as opposed to the nose tackle category, despite being 365 pounds or whatever he is. Tavondre Sweat showed last season that he can play a lot more snaps, the volume, than people were maybe expecting him to. He also has some juice as a pass rusher. Like, he's not just a run stuffer. The ceiling for Tavondre Sweat, I think, remains exceptionally high. And it's different than I think a lot of people want to peg him as just because of his body shape. So I don't know that there's I wouldn't, obviously, between Jalen Carter is the guy that you expect to take over in the future. If something happened, right, and Jalen Carter didn't bummed his way out of the league, got arrested, whatever, something befalls Jalen Carter, and we're trying to find somebody else that could be that guy, there's a chance Tavondre Sweat could do that.
All right, let's go to nose tackle. Who is it, Sam? Who's the best nose tackle? We're only talking nose tackles because of this guy.
I mean, is this the easiest one in the entire NFL? It's Dexter Lawrence, and nobody else is within a country mile of what he's doing.
Yes. Dexter Lawrence. We always like to take the opportunity to rave about how good Dexter Lawrence is relative to his peers at nose tackle.
Who's even second?
I'm right now looking up, let's see, most pressures from the nose tackle position over the last couple of years. Give me a minute here.
Let me ask you let me phrase it in a different way.
Because guys have to play enough, like DJ Reader. I'm just looking at some Jordan Davis. These are guys that just have. So, over the last 2 years, pressures from nose tackle. Dexter Lawrence, 61. Keanu Benton, 18. And Benton's, is he like a true nose tackle? He's just like hey, it's pass rush situation. We're going to give you a matchup over the center. And Benton's awesome, by the way. If you give him a 2-way go against the center, he's great. 61 pressures for Dexter Lawrence. 18 for Benton, 18 for DJ Reader. I would say DJ Reader is probably the number 2 nose tackle in the NFL. Yes.
That's my second. The rephrasing of the question was going to be, is the second best nose tackle in the NFL even good? And I think only because DJ Reader ends up being the answer. The answer is yes, but there might only be 2 good nose tackles in the NFL right now. And one of them is Dexter Lawrence, who's like out of this world elite. One of them is DJ Reader, who's good. I don't know if number 3 on the list is even a good football player at this point. Vita Vea is in the category of Tavondre Sweat. He's not a nose tackle. He should be, maybe, or he looks like he should be, but they don't play him as a nose tackle primarily. Like, he is not a nose tackle. Vita Vea last year if you just look at alignment in the A gap, right? So either gap, the gap either side of the center, 22 different defensive tackles lined up in the A gap more often than Vita Vea. He did it on 92 snaps. That's nothing. Like, that's a tiny amount of his volume. Vita Vea is not a nose tackle.
He's not. I've created these. I gotta find it really quick here. I've created these player alignment profiles for myself that essentially take the percentages that you've lined up in various spots and kind of put you into a like a descriptive bucket. Like what type of alignment did you usually use? So I think Vita. So again, if you're it's all relative to, you know, the percentages of expectation. I think Vita Vea has been classified as the non-nose tackle for me, right? So again, I'm just backing you up. Like, does he line up at nose tackle sometimes? Absolutely, you could find those plays, but relative to the percentages that he plays, yeah, let's see, he is in the last year pass rush heavy, so he rushed the passer at just a higher rate than his peers, non-nose tackle, interior defensive lineman. And then just to add, let me add one more year to that Dexter Lawrence stat, because it was 2022, I think, that he was out of his mind. Since 2022, nose tackle pressures, taking out negated plays. Dexter Lawrence has 103. Vita Vea is number 2 with 23. So yeah, Vita does align at nose tackle sometimes. I'm saying Dexter Lawrence lines up at nose tackle, which is the hardest place to get pressure, but it's the most detrimental to the offense. So it's the hardest place to get pressure because it's easy to double with either guard. But if you get pressure from nose tackle, it is the most detrimental to the offense. And Dexter Lawrence has those games with 7, 8, 9. What do you have? 10 pressures against Kirk Cousins Vikings in the playoffs. No one can do that in the NFL right now. So Dexter Lawrence is in his own world.
Yeah, I mean, so Linval Joseph, right? The ghost of Linval Joseph somehow still playing football. He played 264 snaps last season. And he had almost double the number of nose tackle alignment snaps that Vita Vea did, right? The Linval Joseph at this point in his life, in his career, and his size is 100% a nose tackle. Vita Vea is not, despite the fact that he looks like it. And this is the thing. A lot of the players that you think of as nose tackles don't actually play nose tackle alignment anymore because of the way NFL defenses are. Nobody is playing, you know, an old school two-gapping New England Patriots, Pittsburgh Steelers, early 2000s type of defense. And so that nose tackle alignment doesn't really exist. And even the Giants wouldn't really if it wasn't for Dexter Lawrence. Like, the old system played that type of alignment. The new system's only doing it because Dexter Lawrence is so good at it that they were like, you know what? We don't want to mess with that. Like, the new coaching scheme came in, was specifically asked, hey, are you going to move Dexter Lawrence? They're like, why mess with something that ain't broke? Like, Lawrence is a freaky ability to get pressures out of that nose tackle spot. And by the way, he's an elite run defender as well. So we're just not going to mess with it, right? But like, Jordan Davis is theoretically, like, you think Jordan Davis is a nose tackle, but functionally he doesn't really play a nose tackle alignment. He just plays the other defensive tackle spot. Travis Jones is a nose tackle by, you know, like what you think he should be. Again, Travis Jones, the Ravens basically just play 2 interior defensive tackles. He just plays one of the defensive tackle spots, not necessarily nose tackle. So part of this is there aren't that many nose tackles anymore.
We got to add, and let me just add one more piece of context to this. Dexter Lawrence has rushed the passer way more times from a nose tackle than anyone else. 781, about 300 more. But when you look at pass rush, but it's to your point, there's not a whole lot of guys,
thing, right?
Right. So, but his win percent, his pass rush win percentage is 17%. No one else is close that has that type of volume. Vita Vea is second at 14%, but on 500 fewer rushes from nose tackle. So the other players who are full-time nose tackles are at like 4% and 6%. I mean, it's just absurd. So essentially, when you compare him to the other players who are playing that role, he's 3xing their pass rush productivity, we'll say. That's how I would describe Dexter Lawrence.
I mean, it is absolutely off the charts, the kind of production that Dexter Lawrence has had at nose tackle throughout his NFL career. Like, utterly, utterly ridiculous. And it's one of those instances where I really wish, PFF grades went back 30 years or whatever, and we just had so much more evidence. I would love to know if anybody has ever been close to the kind of production from nose tackle that Dexter Lawrence is able to get. Again, there are going to be nose tackle looking people that have had production, but how many of it is because they were like Vita Vea, where they don't actually play nose tackle basically at all? We just think they do because they weigh 350 pounds, right? Like, I would love to know that based off PFF data, but obviously it only goes back, to 2006 or whatever.
And by the way, to be fair, I would love to know if Vita Vea had that many rushes, if he just played more pure nose tackle, how dominant he would be. I think he has it in him. We talk about that all the time, but he does move around a lot more on that defensive line. Plus they blitz a lot. So that's part of their scheme.
One last note, just for the people don't play nose tackle anymore. Only 8 players last year played 200 or more snaps in A-gap alignments, right? So let's call those nose tackle snaps. Effectively, only 8 defensive tackles, at least one of which we've said is not really a nose tackle, like shouldn't be. They just play there, had more than 200 of those snaps, right? So you're effectively saying, just in terms of volume, there's only 8 players in the league that even play nose tackle to a functioning degree, to the point where it's worth talking about them over a full season. The rest of the people, even the people that we think of as nose tackles, are effectively just big defensive tackles. Jordan Davis, Travis Jones, Vita Vea, they might be nose tackle, Tavondre Sweat, like they might be nose tackle shaped, but they're not functionally playing nose tackle in their defenses for the majority of their snaps. Occasionally it'll pop up in base defense or whatever, but the nose tackle position, it's become fullback. Like, it doesn't exist outside of a couple of guys.
All right. Shoot, this says we got a recording error. I hope that's not the case. All right, let's go linebacker next. Who's the best linebacker in the NFL?
Another one that I think is fairly conclusive and inarguable, I think it's Fred Warner in any given year. Maybe people can challenge him every now and again, but Fred Warner, I think, is comfortably the best linebacker in the NFL. The instincts, the knowledge, the speed, the athleticism, the coverage skills, like his capacity to shrink throwing lanes it's something that I think only he really has in today's NFL. It's there with the likes, the previous generation of the Luke Kuechly's, the Bobby Wagners, and I know these guys are still playing, but they're not in their prime. And Levante Davids of the world, he's the only guy that's at that level now.
Yeah, linebacker's interesting. There's a lot of veterans. I mean, Zach Bond played at an incredible level last year, so I think it's tough to put Bond there number one. But yeah, I think Fred Warner is the clear number one linebacker in the NFL. I think the Niners ask him to do a lot in the middle of that defense as well. It is interesting that the competition, like Bobby Wagner, can't do as much as he's done in the past, but he's still really good. And so there's a lot of these veterans. Demario Davis, I mean, what a career. The last 5 years have just crushed the first, 7 or 8 of his career. He's been unbelievable in recent years. Levante David is still playing extremely well. But we're really talking about older linebackers as the best in the NFL. We haven't had an influx of really good young linebackers. I think Zach Bond has a chance. JOK is always one of my favorites to watch. Roquan Smith, I think, is fantastic. I think it's clearly Fred Warner as the top guy, and has been for the last couple of years now. And look, we've already mentioned a bunch of Niners here. What do we have? 3 now? 49ers. There was a point where Trent Williams was probably the guy at tackle, right? They had 4 or 5 of the best players at each of their positions. Nick Bosa had a case. Juszczyk at fullback, if you want to put him in there. The Niners are still strong as when we're talking about the top-heavy part of their roster.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there was a period where we put this together, and the Niners had half the league. They had the best player at the position. They had a genuine stars and scrubs approach, maybe even more than the Rams ever did, based off the team that they'd assembled. The only the only question to this, I think, going forward would be if Zach Bond's able to back up the season that he had last year, he puts himself into that category. But Fred Warner's been doing it for his entire career. Zach Bond did it last year, would be the clear reason that you differentiate the two.
Future guys, you and I both wrote down a couple of the same names. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think Edgerrin Cooper, based off what he's done so far, he's Green Bay's best linebacker. They just need to give him the full-time role and let him cook. Assuming that happens, I would expect him to immediately be one of the best linebackers in the NFL, and then it just, see how long he can do it for. And then I think Jack Campbell for the Lions is on that kind of trajectory where, freaky athleticism, incredible athlete coming into the league, had that thing where a lot of young linebackers struggle really early, anything going over their head, right? Make them point forwards and play downhill, and they're really good, but figuring out the world of NFL football where you've got to be comfortable moving backwards without being able to really see what's behind you is a real challenge for linebackers making the transition from the college level to the NFL level. Jack Campbell was drowning in that earlier in his career. I think he's already shown a huge improvement in that area. And like, if he takes another step, he's on that pathway.
I'm with you on both names. Edgerrin Cooper, if he takes that next step that you just mentioned, Campbell is starting to make, Cooper has a chance to absolutely be the best guy. He is a force in and around the line of scrimmage, so explosive. By the way, the fact that we didn't mention Sam Laporta at tight end, but maybe, okay, he's in the mix. How about that for the Lions draft? Jahmyr Gibbs had his name mentioned. I just mentioned Laporta to do it. You mentioned Jack Campbell, and we might mention Brian Branch in a minute. That's their first four picks from the 2023 draft. They're all in and around the top 3 to 5 at their positions. Very impressive.
I mean, yeah, that entire group is already either one of the best players in the league at their position or one of the players that we expect to become one of the best players in the NFL at their position in the future. Even at the time, we said, like, we love all of these players. We just quibble with the position value. It turns out if you get them right enough, it doesn't even matter about the positional value because the players are so good that who cares?
That is mostly true. All right, how about cornerback? This is a tough one. Who's the best cornerback in the NFL, Sam?
I think body of work, the best corner is still Sauce Gardner. I know it's the most difficult argument to make of the top guys because he's coming off the worst year. And his season last year was sort of above average, if not average at best. But body of work over the last 3 years, he's been the best corner in the NFL. He's the closest guy you're going to get to a true shutdown player. And I think a lot of the criticism of the guy that plays the game the way he does is always over the top, right? People criticize Revis for being too grabby. Like, grabby is part of playing corner. It's only, it's only a thing that you throw at people as prospects when it's like over the top and it's too big of a problem and it's over, like it's making up for shortfalls in the rest of their game. But Sauce Gardner's, it's not for him. He just is an extremely physical corner, and then sometimes he strays over the line. But look at what he's done at the NFL level. He's been the closest thing we've had to a shutdown corner in the last 3 years.
I think Sauce is very much in the mix. I went with the consistency of Pat Surtain the second. So Surtain, I think, just so good year in, year out. If there are tiebreakers here, I think everything about him is just fundamentally sound. Remember coming out, watching him coming out of Bama, and it's just like he doesn't lose. He doesn't lose deep. He doesn't grab it all. He's never, no penalties. He's incredibly patient. Patience of a monk, as I said. But he's also good in the run game. He's just so good all around. And I think we're starting to see him come into his own as well. So I went with Surtain slightly ahead. If we're talking a year from now, if it was Sauce Gardner, if he has a bounce back year, I think he's been outstanding. He doesn't have he has the on ball production as far as pass breakups, Sauce, but not interceptions. Surtain, I think is just very good at everything. And then you have a guy like Derek Stingley Jr., who has the big plays. He has the interceptions, but he's given up a few more big plays. And Stingley, I'd say, has had about a year and a half of good play in his 3 years, about a year and a half where he started to figure it out. Sauce, I think, has been better snap for 3 years. And Surtain, probably a tick better than Stingley over the course of the last few years as well. So it's close. I think it's a better battle than it was 4 or 5 years ago for the best cornerback in the NFL. I think we're starting to come back. The position's coming back as far as the number of elite players right now.
Yeah, I think it's a three-way conversation between those three: Patrick Surtain, Derek Stingley, and Sauce Gardner. And honestly, if we were doing it a year ago, I don't think it would be close. I think it would be Sauce Gardner comfortably as the only acceptable answer. Even like the last 3 years, you put the three of them together. So even factoring in the worst season from Sauce Gardner, he allows a passer rating into his coverage 20 points better than Surtain over the last 3 seasons. So Surtain, the average target for Surtain is giving you a passer rating of 86. The average target for Sauce is giving you 67. He's given up a third of the touchdowns that Surtain has given up in that time. He's given up about the same amount of yards per reception. He's given up a 40. He's given up a fraction of the first downs that Surtain has given up. So the stats would say Sauce Gardner has been better than Surtain over that period of time. And then those stats also, like, they do Stingley a bit of a disservice because his career has kind of been in the other direction. He started a bit slower than Sauce, but last season he was phenomenal. So I think that's the trio. If you think Stingley's going to pick up where he left off, he's into that conversation with the other two who have been there for the last few years. And then in the body of work says Sauce has been the better player, just not last year.
Yeah, these are interesting debates here because, like, Surtain has given up a much higher completion percentage into his coverage than Sauce. Sauce has a much higher forced incompletion percentage. Surtain's going to get a few more interceptions. I also think he's been in a little bit more difficult role with Denver, where they're using him to track opposing top receivers a bit more and everything. So this is gonna, and then Stingley has a chance to be the number one. If he has another big year, he has a chance to be the top guy. I think Stingley's a little bit more boom or bust to his game, but now I think he now is getting to feel. He just has a better feel right now, right? There's some to his game where there's guys running behind him a lot, but the number of times that he has the makeup speed, like, he just makes quarterbacks pay for mistakes. So I would say Sauce and Surtain they don't allow as much downfield separation as Stingley, but the number of times that Stingley just erased that with makeup speed and ball skills. So it's like playing a little on the edge, a little bit where that you can get burnt, but you're going to make some big plays. And I think that's where Stingley is. So he'll have those years like last year with the 5, 6, 7 interceptions. He'll have more of those years, I think, than Surtain or Sauce.
Yeah, Stingley's the biggest turnover threat of the three. Like, he's the guy where if you're not perfect with your ball location, he can punish you with an interception the way the other two are less likely to do. So that's definitely part of it. The other part, like, a lot of it is how you weigh last season, right? How you weigh the most recent thing we saw. And we know at cornerback in particular, it's a volatile position, and year to year, guys can have a bad year. They can have a great year out of nowhere. Like, we don't know if Derek Stingley is going to play the same as he did last year this year. We don't know if Sauce is going to play the same way as he did last year this year in completely different directions. So yeah, it's all about how you weigh the body of the work versus the most recent season we saw. The only difference with that is, like, Surtain, again, that consistency, he seems to be, that's his superpower. The man is freakishly consistent both year to year and both within games to a level no other cornerback seems to be.
Who else do you want to shout out? Who else could be number one on this list, or what does the future look like?
McDuffie, again, we keep saying, we said this with the last time we brought him up. Like, Trent McDuffie probably deserves to be in this conversation. He just never is.
Trent McDuffie definitely needs to be in the conversation. Quinyon Mitchell after last year?
Yeah, Quinyon Mitchell definitely would be a future one. I wouldn't put him in this group yet, but I think if you're looking for who are the next guys going to be, Quinyon Mitchell would definitely be in that conversation. One other player, by the way, that could potentially be in the top group already, Jalen Johnson from the Bears. Like, he, again, how you weigh the most recent thing versus the total body of work. His total body of work has been more inconsistent, but his elite seasons have been up there with the top guys.
Yep, I agree on Jalen Johnson being up there, at least in the conversation. I wouldn't be surprised if Stingley's the guy a year from now. I'm surprised at how much negativity Sauce Gardner gets, even when he was competing with Tariq Woolen 2 years ago for Defensive Rookie of the Year. Woolen had all the interceptions. I don't know if it's just the lack of interception totals, but when you watch Sauce snap for snap, other than last year, he's been lights. I mean, he was lights out for his first 2 years. Last year definitely wasn't as good, but the 3-year run for Sauce has been as good as any corner we've seen entering the NFL in the last decade.
I honestly think a large part of it is because he has that. Even at draft time, I think so much of it is he's got that weird movement pattern. Like he's built gangly and he doesn't like it doesn't look fluid and it's not aesthetically pleasing, his movement style. And I honestly think that's a huge part of it. So, like, again, go back to Rivas, right? Part of it is physical corners who play man coverage aggressively are inherently grabby and physical. And when you, number one, people don't like that. There's a cohort of people that seem to believe that coverage in the NFL is a non-contact sport, right? So if you touch the receiver, pass interference, throw the flag, right? Which is clearly an idiotic way of viewing it because it isn't. It is a contact sport. The question is, where is the line where it becomes a flag versus that's just physical coverage? So you have one cohort of people that are just inherently wrong to begin with, right? So we can throw those people out as ridiculous. You have a second group of people who just dislike the extra physicality that some corners play the game with. And so you have people that always hated Rivas, that always kind of disliked Richard Sherman sometimes for that. And those people I don't think are necessary. I think those are wrong people as well, though are more defensively wrong than the other people. But those people are going to hate on corners like that, where they are physical. But the whole point of that style of coverage is you're always going to be physical. It's going to be a battle, and you just need to figure out where the line is and not stray too far past it. And then I think another aspect of it is the gangly nature of how he moves. I honestly think that turns some people off where they look at it like, look at him. He's just not very good. He's surviving off his grabbiness, but look, that guy, the way he moves, he can't possibly be an elite physical specimen. And that's like when he did the draft, everyone was expecting him to run like a 4.5 because of the weird gangly movement. It just doesn't look like he's fast. And then he goes out there, runs a 4.4 flat, and everyone's like, well, okay, I guess he is actually an elite prospect after all.
All right, man, let's go. We got two more we're going to break down here. Safety and slot. Let's go to safety. Best safety in the NFL.
Yeah, another one, I think, comfortably, Kyle Hamilton. I think this is one of the easier ones in the NFL as well. The complete player, can play as a deep lying free safety, can be an Antoine Winfield-like game wrecker at the line of scrimmage where you can play him in the slot. You can play him as a strong safety around the line. He just destroys everything short to his side of the field. You can't run screens to his side. You can't run swing passes or even outside runs to his side of the field. And if everything breaks down in the secondary, you can also just say, hey, Kyle, we need you to go play Ed Reed, deep lying free safety, as the lone single high guy as well. And he can do that as well. Complete player, best safety in the league.
We split up safety and slot. So we'll talk Brian Branch in a minute here, but I agree. It's Kyle Hamilton. I think nothing sums up Kyle Hamilton for me quite like the AFC Championship against the Chiefs. One series, I believe it was, he blitzes and bats a pass, then he blows up a screen, and then he breaks up a pass down the field in man coverage on 3 straight plays against the Chiefs. And that just sums up Kyle Hamilton. Everything that you described. Remember at Notre Dame, he was this incredibly rangy free safety. And I think if that was all he needed to do, he'd be great at it. But the fact that he is an absolute screen killer to his side, as you mentioned, a few other guys are like that. But, Jalen Ramsey in his heyday was similar. But Hamilton can do that. The fact that he's played multiple roles, played in the slot, played more of a true free safety role, he can do it all. I love Hamilton. I think he's the top guy. If we're talking more pure free safety types, I think Antoine Winfield Jr. needs to be mentioned. I think Jesse Bates needs to be mentioned. Bates has been, for a position that from a production standpoint can be very inconsistent. I think outside of 1 year, Bates has been incredibly consistent and can be a turnover machine back there. Other than that, I think there's a bit of a turnover at the position. I have to mention our guy, Derwin James Jr. Again, the course of the last few years, he's been good, but probably he's just not as dominant, probably. Hasn't been as dominant these last few years as maybe the first 3 or 4 years of his career. But there's been a little bit of turnover at this position. Guys like Kevin Byard getting older, where you'd have him in the discussion as a pure free safety. But I think Hamilton's the clear top guy with everything that he brings to the table.
No, agree. Like, I think you're right. Like, Jesse Bates is as good as it gets in terms of a ball hawk and free safety, and Kyle Hamilton is probably as good at that as Jesse Bates is. Buda Baker, Derwin James. There are some really good run defending, kind of strong safety types, and Kyle Hamilton is as good at that as any of those guys as well. So the fact that he's as good as any safety in the NFL at any individual aspect of safety, and he's good at all of them at the same time, I think makes him like the clear number one guy. And, just based off last season, I mean, Kirby Joseph had a season as good as any of these guys. He just needs to back it up for multiple years.
Yeah, I mean, Kirby Joseph was great. He had, the 7 or 8 interceptions, whatever the final tally was. That's his game. 9?
9.
That's his game. It's going to be tough to do that every year, but he is so good, ball hawk on the back end. I wrote down a name, though. Who's next? Who's the next future number 1 at safety? Caleb Downs. Caleb Downs, Ohio State. I'm just giving you mine right now.
Okay.
I went to Ohio State.
There were a couple of positions where, the future, the guy who's the best right now is 24 years old, so he's going to be the best for 5 years, in the next 5 years as well. Kyle Hamilton is 24, I think. Is he? Kyle Hamilton's still stupidly young. So Kyle Hamilton is going to be the best safety in the NFL for the foreseeable future.
But I went to college, and I went with future first-rounder Caleb Downs from Ohio State. Just to make a point, that's the next guy that can do Kyle Hamilton, Derwin James-like things. That dude has tight end eraser ability. He's got Brian Branch type of tackling. The only question for him is probably more true free safety type of plays. But when you're talking in and around the line of scrimmage playmaker, Caleb Downs is next, man. He looks outstanding for Ohio State. Game changer via Bama. Right. Best slot in the NFL. Nickel slot.
This is where we bring in Brian Branch. And for similar reasons, I think he's versatile as well. I mean, he showed last season when they need him, he can go play safety and be a true safety as well. And I think he's one of the better safeties in the league. We should have brought him up in the safety conversation more as a safety. If they needed him to play there full time, I think he could be a really high end player at that as well. But I think he's the best slot corner in the league as well. Again, run defense, coverage, ball hawking ability, he's exceptional. There's a Cooper DeJean showed last year as a rookie. He's already in that group as well. Kenny Moore, there's a few high-end slot corners, but Brian Branch, I think, is the best guy.
Yeah, this is also one of those positions where, Branch can play safety. And when we say slot, it's it's an alignment thing, right? It's where you're lined up, but he does something else. Because of that, I'd say Devin Witherspoon deserves a mention. I put Branch, by the way, too, but Devin Witherspoon, when he lines up in the slot, is outstanding. I think Seattle's defense, another year with Mike McDonald and Witherspoon's ability to move around. He can make some big plays there. Cooper DeJean, absolutely. I think took to that position extremely well in Vic Fangio's defense in year 1. So yeah, it's an alignment thing. If you were talking pure nickel, a guy like Kenny Moore from the Colts through the years has just been an absolute playmaker for them. But yeah, I like the shout on Branch, and Devin Witherspoon's the other type that I would look at. And look, Kyle Hamilton could be that guy. If you just had Hamilton playing in the slot all the time, he would probably be the top guy there as well.
Part of the thing that's going to stand out about some of these guys is the versatility, true versatility, kind of like Tyrann Mathieu, right? Tyrann Mathieu has been both a safety and a slot corner in his NFL career, depending on where his defense needed him in any given year and how much they needed him to line up in that given spot. So, Tyrann Mathieu has been both one of the best slot corners in the league and one of the best safeties in the league in any given or throughout his NFL career. The same is going to be true for Brian Branch. I suspect the same is going to be true for a couple of these other players where, their position, the designated position they're going to play, or even the alignment they're going to play is going to differ year to year, depending on injuries, depending on scheme, depending on where they're needed. But if I was creating a team right now, I would want Brian Branch as my slot nickel corner.
I like it, man. Is there? We did not do special teams, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to let the chat decide best kicker, best punter, best long snapper, best kick returner, punt returner, gunner, vice, whatever you want. Opened up special teams for everyone to get the chat cooking here.
Nice. Yeah, that'll get a bump. Well, so Kicker, I think, is easily because there is no longer a best kicker in the NFL. It used to be Justin Tucker, and when Justin Tucker stopped being Justin Tucker, there is no longer a consistent best kicker in the NFL because every year those guys are Brandon Aubrey maybe is that guy, but then it's going to be like a few weeks and Brandon Aubrey is going to get the yips and suddenly forget how to kick, and we're back to square one again. So until Brandon Aubrey forgets how to kick, it's him. Punter, AJ Cole, I think, is probably the best punter in the NFL.
Oh yeah, as an AP voter, you got your votes in for this.
I don't think we do we do preseason watch list. AJ Cole's been a beast though for the Raiders for the last few years. Like that dude has got a howitzer of a leg, good ball location. Like I think AJ Cole's as good as it gets. We need our resident punter expert to weigh in.
Yeah, where's our punter expert? I will absolutely defer to him because my eyes divert once the kick team comes out. Can I divert to the other games?
I don't watch it anymore.
That's my style. I got to go watch the real football somewhere else.
Do we have a best return man in the NFL now?
Cordero Patterson till he retires.
Well, only as a kick returner, and it's probably doesn't look like he's got the juice anymore. He might be done.
Yeah,
Devontae Turpin is probably the best return man in the NFL.
Turpin's a good one.
There aren't many. Again, it used to be a thing. Who knows now that the kicks are coming back more as a thing, but there's been quite a lot of separation between like kick and punt returner. It used to be one guy just automatically did both. I think now there's a lot more separation.
It is a different skill set, right? A kick return is more like a running play where you're setting up your blocking. A punt is more like a screen pass where you have to make a quick move and go. So it's more of a kick returns, more of a running back skill set. Punt returns more of a receiver skill set to oversimplify. So it is different, and even more different now with the new kickoff. And
I think
run play.
We're going to see some evolution of that. I think in the next few years.
All right, man, that was a fun show. Anything else you want to cover? Anything you missed?
No, I mean that's the best of them all.
We played through it, man. I mean, we've talked. There's times people don't realize you're like you and I have done NFL Network hits or whatever, and you have your IFB in, right, so you can hear them. And sometimes with the IFB, it's glitching, and you can hear yourself, and it's awful, right? You're live on TV, and you say something, and you hear the echo. And you can't tell anyone, right? Because you're live. You can't tell anyone this thing's jacked up. It's broken. You got to play through. You got to play through it. This is difficult stuff. First world problems here, Sam. Today we had to play through it. We had these behind the scenes technical issues, and we had to play through it.
Well, yeah, this one is probably difficult to see because other than the occasional glitch, I think from you, it sounded like earlier, no, the YouTube stream seems to have been fine. But from our perspective, the other person keeps dropping off the stream and just disappears for a split second, which can be long enough for the word that's like pertinent to the sentence to not exist. And you have to just sort of mentally fill in the gap of what they were saying. So that's been tricky. There's definitely one radio. I haven't had this radio hit in a long time, but there was one radio station, I think it was in Cleveland somewhere, where whatever they do with their technical end, you would always get the sound coming back to you a second later. And for anyone that think like you've never kind of like, there are some things you can multitask in mentally. One of the hardest things you can possibly do is to keep a coherent thought in your head and articulate it whilst your voice is repeating back to you half a second later in your ear. Yes. It is absurdly difficult to do that. It's nuts. You can't tune it out. It's right in your ear. And it's your own voice repeating back to you half a second later, and you're trying to actually keep to the future sentence, not the past one. It is head-wrecking. I hated doing that radio spot every time it came up.
You also don't know if they're hearing the same thing, so you don't know if you need to stop, and you don't.
It happens so regularly. Yeah. I'm assuming they hear it fine, and I'm also assuming they don't know that it happens. Otherwise, how would anybody do that? But it was absolutely head-wrecking.
Quick update on the studio. We're closing in on it. So I think what's going to happen here is, because we're in the dead time of summer, we're gonna unleash the studio for the 2025 season. So we're looking at late July probably as training camps are starting, and we want to kick it off in style. So we want to kick it off with some season previews and everything. So I think the plan right now is to go team by team late July. That's when we'll start in the studio, because I'm going to be traveling. So we're going to be remote here for another month and a half or so, another 6 weeks, say. The studio, we're allowed to get in there, I think, within the next week. So we're closing in, but we're going to get it all ready, and we're just going to have a big party, a kickoff, tell your friends. That's the key. We need everybody to build it up, tell your friends, 2025 season from the studio with Check the Mic.
Yeah, I have an app now so that we can now access the building without needing to be walked in there. We can actually get in ourselves
whenever we want.
So the shell of a room is getting close to being complete. The construction is close to being complete. Then we need to get in there with our giant desk that's on order. We need to find some chairs that can withstand your, 3-bill certified bulk. We need to, pretty it up, right? We got to get a nice sign on order. We got those kinds of things. We need to decorate the place once we get in there. And then we also need to get internet in there. We need to get Alta Fiber to come in and run a cable and that kind of thing.
You keep trying to get these 3-bill certified chairs. Meanwhile, I don't know what's happened over the last 4 or 5 months, but I've lost a lot of weight. And the recent scale reading has me at my playing weight here, Sam. I am at my playing weight. And I don't know how it happened. I guess I'm eating less. I think my wife's buying fewer snacks, and I have fewer things to snack on here at the house. But here we are. Don't have to worry about 300 pounds right now.
I think just given the history, we'd still be wise to invest in chairs that can withstand as much weight as we can get them to withstand.
I could get it back. Trust me. I could get it back. Also, yesterday we had a little tweeted out. I threw out the old school Franklin batting gloves, the Franklin Classic, Sam, the very best batting glove in history. Pulled those out for the parents versus kids game that we have against our 9-year-old children. So our 9U team, every year we have the parents on one side playing against the kids.
That feels kind of unfair.
Yeah, we dominated.
Yeah.
I went 2 for 2 with a bomb, hit one out, and then perfect game through 4. And I was lobbing it in there to the kids. Threw one up at Harry's head, right over his head, really send a message early on. And then I struck him out. Struck out Teddy, my other son. So I struck out both. It was a great day. Home run, struck out both sons, and we got the win.
Okay. Not sure I see the merit in that particular annual tradition of let's just get the parents together once a year, beat the crap out of the kids in this game.
I was letting them hit it. And they still couldn't hit. It was fine, though. We had fun. Didn't hit any kids. I was actually throwing pumping strikes. And I'm being asked to join over 30 league. And the only reason why I would do it is if there's good content out of that. If you think there's content of getting me pitching in a competitive situation, I'll start training and get back to it.
Is this a thing where, obviously they're going to know you're a former pitcher and all that kind of thing? Have they seen you throw recently?
My velocity for that league would play. It would play fine.
What?
Because I also have the height. I get the movement. I can move it. I would.
There's no way the velocity plays though. The velocity 75 is 75.
I would just need to train. People, you don't understand. Even I have to explain myself here. If I woke up in my prime, if I woke up, say Christmas morning, without training for the last 2 months, say, without throwing, because I started my throwing in December and January. 2 weeks into throwing again, and I just went out there and pitched. Even though at that time I was probably 90 to 94, I'd probably throw 85. I don't know. It just wouldn't be the same because you're just not in full throwing shape, or at least I wasn't. And then it would build up, and then by the time I leave for spring training, boom, I got it. I'm back to low 90s where I need to be. So when I threw the U, I wasn't on 2 months off from throwing. I was on basically 10 years off from throwing. So of course you lose it. So you got to build it back up again. You got to build it. I still have it. I have 85 in me.
That's what I was going to ask you. So
I have
at your
85
decrepit
plus
43-year-old body, what do you think what do you think's in the tank?
I think I'm always 6 months away. 6 months of good training away from 85 to 90.
Whoa, hang on. That's a pretty large range there. I mean, so you think forget 90. 90 is a pipe dream.
80 I could sit 85, 88 with 6 months of training. Oh, as I folded my arms just there, my shoulder is barking.
This is what I'm saying.
Ball hard 10 times yesterday.
You think that you are only a few months of training away from getting 85 again?
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, I think that's look, Will Serio's on the call right here. I think that's content. Like tracking you training, number one, seeing how many different ways you can throw out your shoulder in the next couple of months, and then seeing if the end result of that gets you anywhere near the extra 10 miles an hour you need to get from 75 to 85. That's content right there.
Just a little bit more protein. So I get the diet back in order, proper workouts, start training for power again, scap work again. I'll have to get to the single leg squats and deads, but I could do it.
You need to be like chain eating. You know, they advertise, you won't know this because you don't have a pet, but for like dogs, you're constantly inundated with like, they need these for joint supplements, you know, like make sure their joints stay healthy into their old age. You need to be like chain drinking collagen just to get every ligament and tendon in your body to the point where it's not going to immediately explode the second you try and put any force through it.
Glucosamine? Is that it?
Just nothing but collagen, right? You need to be like drinking bone broth for every meal.
Oh, love bone broth. It's really good. I'm going to go have some bone broth right now for lunch. That's what we're going to do. All right, I'm kind of tempted. I'm motivated for a minute here to start dedicating because, yeah, I'd be healthier, be good for everything. Just like up the workouts over the next few months. Work out a little bit more specific for this.
The chat would like to see me swinging a bat while you pitches and says that would be great content. Well, it was great content and it exists. So we've got to go to the old channel, PFF's channel, to find that. But there is a video of me trying to hit you pitching at 75 miles an hour. I will say, even if you get up to 85, I am perfectly happy to step back in the cage at 85 or whatever you think you can get to at 85, as long as you agree to actually put the ball somewhere down the middle as opposed to off left and away from me. I'm perfectly happy to take a swing at it.
No promises. All right, I'm tempted. I'm tempted to start working at this right now. Only because I realized I'm down to my playing weight. And as my wife mentioned, it's with, no muscle relative to where I was. But I'm down to my playing weight. I think we could get this moving a little bit quicker now.
I'm gonna drop the link in the chat so people can find it.
Do it. It's kind of embarrassing for me that I let you make contact, but it's fine. We can work up to a round 2. I
mean, my single biggest impediment in that was where you were pitching the ball.
I was afraid to hit you. When the front shoulder flies, Sam, the arm drags, and you know where you miss as a righty.
Right.
Up and in on a righty.
And the way you were talking before we went anywhere near the cage, I was somewhat concerned by that as well. And then once I saw the velocity that you were actually bringing to the table, I was not even slightly concerned about getting hit by the ball anymore. Like, all right,
I might need a web redemption then.
When you were bringing 75 to the table, I would have stood there and taken the hit rather than I would have, if you told me there was no hitting it involved and I just had to stand there and be hit with the ball, I would have been okay with that.
I'm motivated for right now. We'll see what happens. If the people want it enough, we can make it happen. All right, man. Fun show, fun discussion. Down to my playing weight. That's right, Drake. Every good thing coming down to the fact that I'm down 20 pounds from where I was around Christmas.
All right. It won't let me post a link in the chat, or at least it didn't show up. Did it show up?
Can you post other YouTube links in there?
I don't know. I tried to, but it doesn't show up in the
Probably not, so you don't spam things. But
anyway, just Google Sam Monson tries to hit Steve Palazzolo pitch, and you'll find it.
It was fun. Any excuse to put my uniform on, like I did yesterday. I went full uni to play against the kids. I might post my home run. Crush that thing. All right. That's it. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again on Monday, 9 a.m. with more Check the Mic.